So thank you for joining us this evening. I'm Helena. I am the Outreach and Engagement Manager for the Saving Wildcats Partnership. I'm joined this evening by my colleagues, Dr. Helen Senn, Estelle Morgan, and Louise Hughes. I'm going to hand over to Helen to introduce the project. And feel free to type messages or questions in the chat, and we will get to them at the end of the talk. Thanks, Helen.
Great, thanks Helena. Hi everyone. It's amazing to see so many of you, and welcome to our latest Saving Wildcats online update. We do these periodically, and it's really great to be able to speak to you today. I'm really glad to have my colleagues Estelle and Lou here, who are going to do most of the heavy lifting on this talk. So you'll be grateful to know you're just going to hear a little bit from me, just giving a little bit of an overview of the project. So just a little bit about who we are. So Saving Wildcats is a European-wide partnership project, and it's dedicated to the recovery of the Scottish wildcat, which is our last native cat species here in the UK and in Scotland, and it's critically endangered. And we're aiming to prevent the extinction of wildcats in Scotland by breeding and releasing them into the wild, into carefully selected sites within the Cairngorms National Park, and really managing all of the threats as well that are facing this amazing species. And it's a partnership between a whole bunch of different organisations. It's led by the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, which owns Highland Wildlife Park, where we're based and where we're talking to you from tonight. And the partners are the Cairngorms National Park Authority, Forestry and Land Scotland, Nature Scot, Norden's Ark, which is a conservation-focused zoo in Sweden, and Junta de Andalucía, who are the government of Andalucía in Spain, who lead one of the partners of the Iberian Lynx Recovery Project, which is one of the world's most successful cat reintroduction projects, and a project that we've learned a lot from. And we're working together really closely with Cairngorms Connect and Wildland and the RSPB on this project, which is funded by the European Union. So just to, I think a lot of you on this call have probably been to our other presentations, so we're not going to give too much background today. We're just going to launch into this year's updates, but just so that you can be placed where we are. The project is taking place in the Cairngorms National Park. As I mentioned, we're located the kind of headquarters for the project and the breeding centre that Estelle is going to be talking to you a little bit more about are based at Highland Wildlife Park in Kincraig, in Badenoch and Strathspey, and we're releasing wildcats into the Cairngorms Connect area and into the surrounding landscape. And a lot of this year has looked a little bit like this, and this is the area that we work in. And in terms of the overall project plan, the current phase of the project has been running since 2020, and really it's been a project so far of two halves. One about preparing everything for the point of releases, so both preparing the site and also preparing the population of wildcats for release into the wild, and then that coming together in 2023 for the first releases. And now this year, we just completed the second set of releases in the summer of 2024. And so that's really what we're going to be updating you on. In terms of the future of the project, we're going to be conducting more, hopefully more releases over the coming years. And the plan is to conduct more releases next year. And then we'll be looking forwards to the future for the conservation of this species, because we know that it's probably going to be a really long haul in terms of the recovery of a species like this. It's not going to happen overnight, and as a project team, we're committed to try and make that work for the long run. So please stay tuned for more updates on that. So that's enough from me, and I'm going to hand over now to Estelle.
So thank you all for coming and hearing us talk tonight. My name's Estelle, and I am the animal team leader on the ex-situ team of the part of the Saving Wildcats project. And over the course of kind of the next 20 minutes, I'm going to give you a bit of an insight into our Conservation Breeding for Release Centre. The Conservation Breeding for Release Centre is really where all of the magic happens, where all of the nice exciting stuff, where we have lots of nice kittens and all of the approaches to animal management that we have. I'm going to be touching a lot on how we're actually breeding the wildcats and all of the work that goes into that. And then also, how are we preparing these cats for a life in the wild? What are we doing that is making them have the survival skills that they may need once released? And how are we assessing that as well? So there's some real big questions, which I'm hopefully going to touch upon and give you a really big insight on our side to what we're doing. And then I'm going to give you a bit of an update from the last 12 months, how many kittens we've had and how those kittens have got on, and a few other interesting things that have happened as well. And then I'll finish just by telling you what's on the cards for this year. So firstly, I just wanted to kind of introduce the ex-situ team to everyone a little bit. In terms of ex-situ conservation, some people may not be overly familiar, but essentially what we do is everything to do with active management of these wildcats, everything to do with things from wildcat nutrition all the way through to enclosure design, and then some of the more technical aspects, like some of this key data that we collect about the wildcat behavior, which helps to tell us if these cats are suitable for release, and then lots of the breeding as well. So it's everything to do with the cats not out in the wild. So we're overseen by David Barkley. And if you've been to some of these online talks before, you may have seen him talk. He's our ex-situ conservation manager. And then there's myself. I've already introduced myself. We have Rachel Williams, who's one of our senior keepers, and she has got tremendous practical experience when it comes to wildcats. She's been working with wildcats for decades. We have Alex Perry. She's one of our experienced keepers, and she leads quite a lot on some of the unusual data that we collect on the cats' personalities, which is really quite exciting. And then we also have Ben Painter, who joined us last year, and he helps us organize lots of our camera equipment and some of the behavior stuff that we collect to inform the releases of the cats as well. As you can see, we're quite a small team, and we can't take all of the credit for all of the work that we do and all of the things I'm about to present. We're supported by a whole host of volunteers. We have a volunteer who works with us permanently, but on just a one-day basis, a maintenance volunteer, and he helps us bring all of our crazy ideas about animal enrichment to life, and he helps us with lots of the enclosure refurbishments, and he's absolutely essential to everything that we do. We also have a volunteer who supports us with all of the behavioural monitoring that we do of the wildcats, which I'll get into a bit more detail about later. We have volunteers which support us with some of the practical aspects of looking after all of the wildcats that we have. And then occasionally throughout the year, we do volunteer days as well, where we get groups of people to come and help support us with doing some enclosure refurbishments after we've released the cats and the enclosures are empty. But yeah, we're a bit of a small team, but hopefully at the end of this talk, you'll see how much of a punch that we pack with all the work that we do. So this is our dedicated conservation breeding for release centre. The conservation breeding for release centre is really split into two main halves. On the left-hand side of this photo, you'll be able to see kind of 3 blocks of enclosures that have got roofs over the tops of them. They look a little bit like Toblerones. This is the dedicated breeding enclosures, and this is where we have pairs of cats that we manage, and it's where our kittens are produced, and it's where the kittens spend the first 6 months of their lives. And then over to the right-hand side, the second phase of the conservation breeding for release centre are our pre-release enclosures. And you can tell that there's a huge difference in how they look. These enclosures are much larger, they're open-topped, and they really incorporate the natural landscape that surrounds them. And most importantly, this whole conservation breeding for release centre is surrounded by and protected by a predator-proof fence, which helps to keep all of the occupants within the centre free from disease. If there happen to be any feral cats, foxes, anything like that passing by the area, it prevents them from entering, which is absolutely critical when we're trying to manage a really healthy captive population of wildcats, which we're then going to release into the wild, because we want these cats to be as healthy as they possibly can be, both behaviourally and physically prior to release, and this fence really helps with that. And this whole area is set at the Highland Wildlife Park. It's in quite a quiet area of the park, away from members of the public. It's totally not accessible to anyone who isn't those people that you've just seen on the previous slide. And that's what makes this place really special. The whole premise of how we're managing cats is to really minimize disturbance and minimize them becoming too habituated to people. So getting too used to humans. We don't want them to do that. We want them to kind of retain a little bit of fear for people, because that's what we want, how we want them to behave once they've been released. But if you ever do happen to pop to the wildlife park, this area is viewable from, we call it Snow Leopard Hill actually, but if you ever come to the park, you can walk up to this hill and there's a lovely viewpoint and you can look out across this whole area and see pretty much this view. So I'd recommend going to have a look. So just to be a bit more specific about our breeding enclosures, in total, we've got 8. So you'll be able to see in the picture, we've got 4 blocks, and these blocks can be split in half, and this is where we house our breeding pairs. So we have 8 breeding pairs in total, and we have the ability within these enclosures to be able to manage those pairs throughout various different points in their life. We can manage them when we want to keep them separate before we put them together for breeding. So we can have a male on one side and a female on the other side. We can have it all open, so we can have all of the male and the female together. And if they've got kittens, we can have the whole families together. We also, you may notice smaller parts of the enclosure, which are just off to the back. These are what we call holding pens. And these are really essential for helping us manage the cats. And what I mean by that is, when we've got kittens, we have to give them vaccines. So these smaller pens helps us to be able to capture the cats to do that. And the way that we manage the cats in these enclosures is more hands-on. And the primary reason for that is that we have kittens that need vaccines, and we have to look after all of our breeding adults as well. The breeding adults that we have, they have come from zoological collections and private collections from across the UK, and many of these animals have, you know, previous history with being on display to the public, and some of them don't. So some of them are a little bit more used to humans, so we can use that to our advantage a little bit when we're managing them. And then as soon as the kittens are born, we kind of take a step back and have less kind of contact with them, just to encourage them to be quite adverse to us and our presence. And in terms of the pre-release enclosures, in total, we have 20. So what this means is that we can use them individually, and we can house cats individually, and that cat has its own territory. We have got one enclosure out of action at the minute, but yeah, we have got capacity to hold kind of lots of cats individually in these large, complex areas. The enclosures themselves, as I mentioned, are open topped. So this allows for kind of free flow, you know, birds to jump into their enclosures and for the cats to be able to be like, oh, what's that, for the first time, and really kind of spark those innate behaviors which they may not have been exposed to in the previous enclosures. And there are lots of dynamic structures in these enclosures, both man-made and natural. If you count on that left-hand side 4 enclosures up, you'll be able to see a really big birch tree that we have. And the cats use this all the time to climb. And that is such a vital behavior that we want to promote. We would really want to promote these cats in gaining their muscle tone and muscle strength, so that not only are they behaviorally competent, but they're also physically fit before they're released. All of the structures that we've built as well are dynamic, which means that even though they're man-made, they wobble a little bit. So the cats have to use their claws and they have to engage their core and use their tails to balance. And it's these key subtle differences which is us gearing these cats up for a life in the wild. Also, all of these enclosures are linked, so we can give cats access to multiple enclosures. We can mix cats around. You know, the opportunities for managing these cats in these enclosures is pretty much endless. And we have a really extensive CCTV surveillance system, which I'll talk a lot about a little bit later. So I kind of just wanted to touch upon our management cycle, because it can get a little bit confusing into what we're doing and when we're doing it. But we can start from now. We can start from January, as we're in January at the minute. This is breeding season. So at the minute, we're preparing some of our wildcats to be mixed for breeding. So we breed cats January, and that's when we pop them together. And we typically start to see kittens born around the beginning or the end of March last year is when we had our first litter of kittens. And then the kittens will stay with their parents for around 6 months. But over the course of those 6 months, at 9 weeks old, they will receive vaccines, they will have a microchip, and they will have hair samples taken for genetic testing, and we will check their sexes. And then at 12 weeks old, they'll have their booster vaccines. When they are around 5 months old, we mix the father back in with the family for some really vital socialization. And then at 6 months, we disperse that cat or those individuals into the pre-release enclosures. And then that's finally a bit of time for the mum and dad to have a bit of a break from the kittens. And this is kind of the way that I see it, is the breeding center is almost like primary school. And then once they get dispersed into these pre-release enclosures is when it kicks up a notch. And this is almost like university, just before they have to go out into the wild and do their real jobs. And once they're in the pre-release enclosures, we start to kind of manage them in a totally different way. We really want to be hands-off with these cats, and we want to kind of be up there as little as possible to prevent them habituating to us too much. And we start to do lots of key behavioral monitoring, and we collect lots of data on their ability to source food and just lots of things about them, which helps to inform us if those cats are suitable for release or not. This is kind of graded up against a checklist, which again, I'll talk about in a bit. Once they've passed this behavioral checklist, they'll then see the vet, and the vet will check them over, and providing that's okay, they can then go on and have their collars fitted and be released. So that's one cycle. So to produce one cat, it takes about 15 months from the start of breeding season, and providing the mother and father or the female gets pregnant pretty soon, it takes about 15 months, and we're releasing cats at about a year old and over a year old. And one thing I will say about this as well is we have both of these cycles kind of operating at the same time. So as an example, at the minute in my job, we are just coming into breeding season. So we're managing the first parts of that, and we're just starting to really collect data and manage cats to be released over the summertime. So we're kind of doing it at the same time. At our capacity, we could have the breeding center full of kittens and cats just about waiting to be released. So we could have about 60 wildcats or so. So it's quite a lot. So our approach to wildcat management is really different to traditional animal management. And kind of what I mean by that is, if you've ever visited a zoo, you may see the animal keepers there doing lots of training and kind of really building that good rapport up with the animals. And I come from an animal keeping background, and we would always see the animals that we work with as colleagues. With us, we kind of want to discourage that connection as much as possible, and we really want to have that hands-off. And it can be quite challenging, because when you're there as an animal keeper, you can physically see if your animal is unwell, or you're in the enclosure a couple of times a day, giving it multiple feeds every day. So you're able to kind of pick up on things quite quickly. And with us, it's about striking that balance with having reduced human presence, but also still having that high level of care. And what we have been able to do over the last couple of years is utilize technology to help us bridge that gap. The CCTV system that we have, among a few other gadgets that we have, has been absolutely instrumental, because it means that we can observe our cats night and day, even more than what we could if we were in the enclosures all the time and around the enclosures all the time. And because of all of this, we've been able to document so much about the wildcats and their behavior and how they progress and how we manage them. And one key thing is, this has not been done before in the UK. So breeding cats to release them, there isn't a guidebook on how to do it. There isn't a guidebook that says the wildcat should be, climbing trees up to 50 meters before it's released. There's not something like that. So we're trying to do our best to set these cats up for success, and documenting that and collecting as much data as we can to inform the decisions that we're making about releasing cats. And we do have these subtle differences between the way that we manage cats for breeding and the way that we manage cats for pre-release, and gearing those cats up for a life in the wild. So for the breeding kind of husbandry, biosecurity is a huge part of our role. And I touched upon it earlier with the predator-proof fence. The picture on the left, we have a changing shed. It's not a glamorous word for it, a changing shed where we go in and we change our clothes into overalls before we even enter the centre. Every single enclosure has got its own set of foot dips, and all of this as well helps us have this healthy captive population that is going to be suitable, or is, you know, it's not going to fail on its health criteria to be released. And we're trying to protect those cats as best as we possibly can, particularly when you've got young adults or you've got young tiny kittens who they haven't quite had their vaccines yet, and there's that kind of gap between when their mother's immune system kind of wears off and they haven't had their vaccines yet. So managing them kind of that way is really, really important. We also manage them to give them a lot of choice in terms of den options, because we want them to find somewhere kind of cute and cozy to give birth and where they feel safe. So we give them high up options, which is the picture next to the changing shed. And then we've also got lots of den boxes, which are ground boxes. And the females have got about 5 or 6 different options. And actually last year, we actually had our first birth in one of the high up boxes, which was quite exciting, a bit nerve wracking, because we didn't want the kittens to fall out, but luckily the mum was very experienced and she just wanted to be up high. But typically they always choose the ground boxes to give birth. We also play around with lots of enrichment as well to really give the cats the opportunity to develop all of these key behavioral skills, like using their paws to get food rather than just them kind of getting the food with their mouths. It's adding that extra challenge. So you can see a pipe with holes in it. We pop food in that and it's raised, and the cats really have to try and figure out how to get the food out. And it sounds very simple to us, but actually for the cats, it's not so simple, especially juvenile cats. And it really kind of keeps their brains thinking. We collect really vital data on the cat's diet as well while they're in the breeding enclosures. We weigh in and we weigh out everything. So what we've been able to do over the last couple of years is see preferences for different food types. We've been able to see when their appetites increase, when their appetites decrease. And on a daily basis, I can see how much these cats are eating, which is a really good indicator to their overall health and how they're feeling. We also have CCTV system within these breeding enclosures as well, which help us just to monitor the cats, and particularly when we've got kittens and we want to not disturb the family group too much, we can observe everything from our CCTV control room. And as I mentioned earlier, with some of the cats that have come from a more kind of captive background, we've been able to work with them so that they will voluntarily come down to a set of weighing scales once a month. We don't do this with kittens. We only do this with some of the adults that have come from a zoo background. They come down to a set of weighing scales once a month, and over the course of the last 3.5 years, we've collected so much data on wildcat weights that we've been able to see these really cool trends of seasonality with them, which is really, really cool. With the breeding management, it starts, as I said, in January. So at the minute, we're in the estrus monitoring phase. So what we're looking for is signs that the females are ready to tolerate a male, shall I say. The females are always in charge. And what we tend to do, ideally, is monitor the behavior, and we wait until we see really cool behaviors like the females calling. The males call quite a lot throughout the year. But when the females start to call, then we know that they're kind of ready to receive a male. But also we see behaviors like this. This type of behavior, although it looks quite funny, is her advertising to the male, and it was the perfect then opportunity for us then to mix them together so that we could really optimize our breeding efforts. Sometimes when you mix males and females together, when the female isn't quite ready, there can be mild aggression, or the female just isn't so tolerant, and then it can hamper next efforts from the male. The males can get a little bit scared of the females. So if you introduce them when she's less tolerant, he kind of gets a little bit scared, and then it kind of knocks his confidence a little bit. So once we mix cats together, we then soon see mating, and this mating can last for 7 to 10 days. Last year, we had a pair of cats that just mated continuously over the breeding season. And what we do, as soon as we see that first mating, we then create a due date. And that due date is 63 days after that first mating. And then that date is so important because, one, it means that we can see if the female's pregnant and manage that pregnancy, i.e. increase her diet, get away from her. But also it means that we can manage the nest boxes, we can not disturb them too much so that she feels comfortable to den in them. And also it means that we can be quite accurate with when we're expecting kittens. Last year, we were accurate with all of our kittens. We predict it within a week, and we had every single one spot on, which was quite cool, to be honest. And then once we suspect a birth has happened, we back off entirely for 2 weeks. We just pop some food in for the female and the male, and we monitor them entirely with CCTV. And we don't clean too much in the enclosures at this point as well, because again, we just don't want to disturb them. And then at 2 weeks, we pop in, and is when we first check the nest boxes, and we do this with our phones so that we've got video footage. So firstly, we can count all of the kittens and see what the litter size is. We can check that the female's okay, but we normally would have seen her on CCTV at that point. And at this point, we separate the male out of the group. And that's because the female can get pregnant again. And around this 2 week time frame is when she may start to cycle again. So it's just important, so that we don't have too many kittens, that we then manage that pair and separate them. And then about 4 weeks is when the kittens start to emerge from the den sites. And it's when we then start to collect data on their personalities. So what we do is we pop in some novel objects like traffic cones, and we see how the cats respond, how the litters respond. So we can try and pick trends. Are they quite bold? Are they quite shy? And this is all really cool. And then at 9 weeks old is when they get their first set of vaccines, and they'll stay with mum until they're 4 months old. And then dad will be reintroduced between 4 and 5 months old, and they'll live as a lovely little family together. And then at 6 months is when they move to the pre-release enclosures. And as I said, this is when it really kind of ramps up for the cats. And it's when we back off a little bit. So we have an electric buggy. We only use electric vehicles around these enclosures to minimize the cats getting used or linking the sound of engines and food together. It's really important. The enclosures have got this built-in enrichment as well. And I just want to flag the picture next to the buggy. One of our volunteers built this for us, and they called it the nodding donkey, is what it's called. And it's a built-in enrichment device which dynamically presents food to the cat. And I'm going to show you a video a bit later about how the cats use those. And the technology is really important. I just want to draw your eyes to the 3 lower pictures here. So we've got our extensive CCTV system on the right. And the only way I can describe this is like Big Brother, but for cats. And all of these cameras, we can move them around, we can zoom in, and we can be really targeted with what it is that we want to observe the cats doing. And the cat just walking into that box in the central photo, those are a set of remote weighing scales. So instead of me calling the cats down to a platform to get a weight from them every month, these cats will weigh themselves as long as I put the box in. And this has been an absolutely vital part of our health management for the cats, because when they're in these large enclosures, even though we feed them, we still need to keep tabs on these health parameters for them, so that we know that we're doing our best for the cats. And then lastly, on the left is a cat looking at a box that's open. This is something that we've been trialing for the last couple of years, and it's a remote feeding box. And what this does is we put food in it, we put it in the enclosure, and we hide it, and it opens, and it means that the cats can have food without us there. So it's taking us out of the equation, but it also means that the cat can have food at different times outside of our 8 to 5 working time frame, and it can have food at a more natural time for it when it's more active, like dawn and dusk. And then lastly is the picture of the cat carcass feeding. This is something that we brought in actually in year 1 when we were first managing cats for release. There was a couple of papers that were published of kind of anecdotal reports of wildcats in Europe scavenging on deer carcasses over winter, and just how important that food source may have been to those cats in order for them to survive. So we thought, well, let's kind of include that into the diet of the wildcats over winter when we're managing them for release, just to give them the opportunity to become exposed to a carcass, and we can monitor what they do with it. And actually what we found was they were feeding from it, they were caching that food as well, so they were burying it under moss, and then they were returning back to that food item and feeding from it again. And so that's been really cool. We also give the cats kind of whole carcasses as much as we possibly can, like whole rabbits, just to encourage them to kind of cache food as well and save food for later, because I think that's a really important survival behavior kind of post-release. So in terms of going back to that question, how are we assessing if these cats are suitable for release or not from a behavioral perspective? And maybe one thing which I've just missed out to say is we can't give these cats live food. Everything has to be dead. You can't legally give the cats anything live. So that means when you're trying to prepare a carnivore for release who is solely built around hunting and killing something, it can make it a little bit tricky. So in collaboration with some advisors that we have that work on some other really cool projects that Helen previously mentioned, like the Iberian Lynx project, we came up with a pre-release checklist. And these are a number of questions or a number of things that the cat needs to pass in order for us to deem it behaviorally suitable for release. And the whole checklist itself combines the behavioral aspect and also the health assessments that the vet will do, and then also other things like, does it have a collar fitted? And you'll notice it's divided into 2 main areas. We have the critical release criteria, and this is what the cat absolutely must pass in order for it to be released. And the 3 things I'm going to focus on kind of for the next slide is, does the individual seek human contact, which is really important. We really don't want these cats, you know, coming up to people's homes and going in and, you know, just milling about like a normal house cat, because they're not. And does the individual exhibit natural behaviors? So what we mean by that is, does it exhibit a range of behaviors that are normal for a wild cat? And can the individual source food independently? And with that, we are able to utilize our CCTV system to gain the answers to all of that. So we've developed several different ways that we collect that data. And some of it, well, it's all done by our behavioral monitoring volunteer. And it can be a little bit tedious at times, because as I said, we can have maybe 19 cats that we're managing at our capacity that we need to collect data from. And it can be every single hour for every single cat, write down what that cat is doing using the CCTV. It can be watching that cat live for 15 minutes and writing down every single behavior that you see that cat do for 15 minutes. And it sounds really easy, but it's actually really, really difficult. But this really supports us in our day-to-day management as well as the pre-release checklist. And the whole process of this data collection to answer those questions takes about 5 months. We start in January with the hardcore data collection, and so that then for the summertime, we have all that data in order to inform the releases. And we get to see some really cool behaviors like opportunistic hunting. As I said, we don't give the cats anything live, but there is also scope for small mammals to freely walk into the enclosures. So occasionally we do get evidence, can the cat source food independently? And I mean, the cat in the video there is clearly demonstrating that it was able to source food independently. Whether or not the cat then went on to eat the vole is another question, but it's certainly showing all of those pre-behaviors, which are really cool. And then for every single cat, we then produce this output report. And this is all very boring, but absolutely essential. Every cat has this output report, which summarizes all of the data that we've collected and answers that critical release criteria on the normal behaviors, that can the cat source food, and does the cat come into contact with people, or how does it behave towards people? So I just wanted to show you something that may put this into context a little bit. This is a cat that was released in year 1. And I just wanted to show you maybe some of his results. So is he displaying normal behavior? And this is some of the crude data here. But yes, we can see he's displaying quite a range of behaviors, and we've kind of summarized these behaviors here. So lots of food related behaviors, lots of general activity, which can be things like climbing, it can be grooming, it can be, denning, it can be caching food, it can be lots of different things. And more specifically, can this individual source food independently? We can see that we observed him eating quite a lot. He wouldn't be able to eat if he couldn't source the food, because we don't hand feed him. We saw him following scent trails. We saw him pulling on food and pouncing, and they're all really important behaviors. And does the cat interact with humans or seek human contact? And this graph will not make sense to anyone, but what I will tell you is he scored a 3 consistently. And what that means is he didn't seek human contact. He did not come towards us, and he didn't try and, rub his head on our legs or anything like that. So that's a perfect response on our side. He didn't come towards us, and he stayed where he was and hunkered down, is what it translates practically. So overall, he showed really good behaviors. So from a behavioral perspective, there wasn't anything from us to say that he couldn't be released. It was then handed over to the vets for them to make an assessment. So when the cat has passed all of its behavioral competencies, it will then see the vet, and the vet team will put the cat under a general anesthetic, and the cat will have x-rays and a full health check. And providing the vet's happy that the cat has good, stores of fat in order to be released, it will have a collar fitted, and then we'll head to the soft release enclosures. And I'm not going to talk a lot about the soft release enclosures, apart from the fact that we still have a duty of care for the cats when they are here. So what we do is we still, our team go and check the cat every day, still give water, give food, and collect really important data on the cat's behavior still while they're in these enclosures. The cats will spend a number of days here just kind of settling down, getting used to its surroundings, and eating lots of food before we then release the cat, which is this is then when we hand over the cat to our field team, and it kind of is their job then, it's their duty of care, and we go back to all of our kittens. So it's kind of amazing that we see these cats quite literally get created, and we're really instrumental in that, and then we see them get released. It's incredible. So I'm just going to swing by some updates for the last year, for those of you who may not be up to date or haven't followed us over the last 12 months. But in January last year, we paired up 8 breeding pairs, and of those 8 pairs, we had 6 that went on to produce litters of kittens. And we had our first litters of kittens were born in March, and we had our largest litter size was 4. We also had litters of 2, and the year before that, we had a litter of 1. So it can really range. We've also had litters of 5 in the past, and there's kind of nothing really that determines it. And the sex ratio was 7.9. So what that means is we had 7 males and 9 females. And over the course of the summer last year, we released 9 of our wildcats that we had previously bred in 2023. And that was 3 males and 6 females. And although we had more cats within our pre-release enclosures, we kept 7 of them behind, and they are still within our pre-release enclosures at the minute, and we're managing them for a further release this year, potentially. We also had 11 of the cats that were born last year. We transferred them to their pre-release enclosures. and they joined the 7 cats that we held back from the year before. We've had 3 siblings that we have decided to not transfer to the pre-release enclosures just yet, and they're going to remain in our breeding centre. And it may be that they stay there with their mum for the year, and then then we'll move them to pre-release, or it could be that they may become breeding females themselves. Yeah, we're not entirely sure yet, but they're just going to remain with us under our care. We have 1 male that we've bred who is not going to go to our pre-release enclosures just yet, and he's going to spend some time being a breeding male. So that'll be really exciting to have one of our young breeding males. And unfortunately, we had to euthanize a male after he sustained a injury that was too serious for us to treat him. So that was a really sad time for the team. And we also had our first rehabilitation case, which I'm just going to touch on really quickly. But we had a male that sustained some type of injury or trauma in the wild, and the decision was made to recapture him and bring him back. So we brought him here back to the park, and we were able to rehabilitate him and then re-release him again. And this is just him interacting with that enrichment device. And lastly, we won an award for our contributions to wildcat husbandry as well. I just thought I would pop that one in there just to finish, to brag a little bit. But yeah, in terms of the future, we're going to be supporting more releases. We're welcoming some new volunteers over the next couple of months. And we're just working on writing up best practice. So I think I've been going on for a little bit too long now. So I'm going to pass back over to Helena, who will now pass over to Louise.
Good evening, everybody. As Helen said, I'm Louise Hughes, and I'm the Field Operations Manager. So I deal with the kind of the running of the day-to-day programme of the field team. And yeah, I'm going to talk a bit about what has been happening through 2024 from our perspective. So I'll cover what the Wildcats have done, what the team have been doing, some of the challenges that we've been facing, and also what current activities we are up to. So next slide, please. In winter 2023, 2024, we really didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know how the cats were going to fare. Were they going to be all right with the cold, snowy weather, as well as, if we can cast our minds back, we had quite a few storms that came rolling through. But we needn't have worried. Everything was fine. And what it did do was it allowed us to track in a slightly different way. So yes, we were still doing the GPS radio tracking, but also with the arrival of snow, we were able to look for proper tracks and signs in the snow. And that was really something quite special for the field team. One thing that we did notice from the GPS data was these appearance of clusters. Now, for us, each one of those points represents around about 15 minutes, unless the cats are resting when they drop to every 4 hours. But with these huge cluster of points, first of all, we started to kind of think, is there something wrong? And so we needed to do a bit of ground truthing. I can remember quite vividly the incident on the left-hand side with just this purple individual, with Lara, Alice and myself having to go out into the field in the dark with thermal imagers, torches, and trying to establish what had actually gone on with this female. We didn't know that if there was something untoward going on, but we needed to get out onto the ground and see what was happening. And as we were clambering about, Alice, a bit further away, contacted Lara and myself and said, no, I can see the female through the thermal imager. Everything looks fine. And a couple of seconds later, I tripped over something on the ground. And then on the right-hand side, you've got these multiple colours, and each colour represents a different cat. So you can see that multiple cats were turning up at an area roughly at the same time. And what we were finding, next slide please, is this, which is the cats feeding on carcasses, and particularly roe deer carcasses. And this is I mean, what I stumbled over was a roe deer carcass, which wasn't exactly pleasant. But what it did mean that we could put out camera traps and we could get some imagery of what these cats were doing. And as Estelle mentioned in her talk, you know, they fed the cats carcasses, and it seems to have been quite a vital resource for the cats getting through the winter months. And this individual, Mariel, female, she actually used this deer carcass for around about 3 weeks. She stayed quite close to it. She would go off and then come back, but obviously it was very important to her. And it wasn't just deer carcasses that we started to find when we started to explore these cluster points in their GPS movement. It's things like hares, pigeons, ducks, geese. So it was really quite eye-opening for us, and for us to get a bit of an understanding of what the cats were utilising through the winter months. Next slide, please. Moving on, so in February, March time last year, we were having to look at trapping the wildcats for collaring or recollaring. One of the things with the GPS collars that we have is that the sheer amount of data that we want to collect in a short amount of time means that the battery does not last too long. So roughly around 8 to 9 months. And then as you start to see the temperatures dropping through the winter months, that knocks it a bit. So we have to get moving quite quickly in trying to trap the wildcats to be able to remove the collars, or in this case, we were wanting to recollar them so that we could get a bit of an understanding, especially around the females and birthing windows. Now, those collars do also have a weak link in them, so they can drop off of their own accord. But on the right-hand side, you'll see this photo, which is one of our setups. So you've got the trap there down by the gate with some camouflage. The cats aren't really too bothered, but it helps us camouflage it from people as well. We've got the camera trap at the lower left-hand corner, which means that we can gather really good quality videos and images of what is visiting the traps. Within those traps, sometimes we'll use a food bait, but more often than not, we're using some kind of scent lure, which includes urine from some of the captive cats, as well as valerian. So if anyone has smelt valerian, it is extremely strong, and it's like a very strong catnip. Some cats absolutely love it, and they will roll around in it, and it's a really good lure for getting them into the traps. Then to finish it off, we have this camera called a rear link. So it's kind of in the top right, left-hand corner, sorry. This is a live feed camera, which provides video linkage to our mobile phones. It's extremely useful when monitoring the traps, especially through the evening and overnight. So we have intervals where we check it, as well as using trap technology, which is known as a mink police. It's a device that sits on the trap itself, and then as the trap is triggered, then it alerts us on an alarm on our phones again, and then we can look at the live video and see what's actually gone inside, and hopefully we will have caught a wildcat. So when we're trapping for recollaring, we were able to trap 12 of the 18 individuals. And the reasons behind that we didn't get all 18 was that 3 females were too close to the pregnancy window, and we obviously don't want to cause stress. So we decided and took the decision that we wouldn't trap those individuals, and we'll wait until a later date to be able to do that. We had one male that was moving far too much. He didn't really have a territory, so he was moving constantly, and there was no particular spot that we felt that we could put a trap in order for him to come to it. And his collar ran out of battery soon after trying to start to trap for him. So we don't really know too much about what has happened to that individual. Then we have the male that, if we cast our minds back to 2023, made the incredible journey over to Deeside, to Mar Lodge, and the vicinity. His collar, we don't know why, but for whatever reason, lasted a bit longer into the summer months. And then, because of the conditions really in the summer, it was great summer, well, an okay summer over that side. and putting out a trap at that time when you've got active prey. He was in an area with lots of rabbits. He did not show any interest, so we were unable to collar him. So now we use passive monitoring techniques in terms of camera tracking to be able to keep tabs on him, and we will be looking at removing his collar soon. I think there's one more point on that, Hannah. And then we had one male that we didn't recollar. That was because he was the crypt orchid individual. He had a small territory, and he's been really easy to passively monitor, so through camera trapping, but also because he turns up quite readily at a local wildlife hide. So the staff there pass on information to us about what they're seeing and when he's turning up, which is extremely useful. Part of the recollaring is that we have this amazing resource, which is a van that we take out in situ. So we have a dedicated vet team that bring this along, and we're able to do everything in the field. So they can do the general anaesthetic, they can do a health screening, and then they can remove and then put on a new collar. Yes, it can be quite cold, but that's nothing that a few hot water bottles and some heat pads can't rectify. And it is, yeah, like I say, a really great resource for us. And looking at the statistics, so on average, it was taking us around 17 days of pre-baiting and pre-luring for the wildcats to turn up and take notice of the trap and be able to actually go inside. And that's one of the key things, is that yes, they might come and have a sniff around the outside, but we really need them to go into the trap. So we take quite a lot of time and encouragement to get them to do that. Randall was one of the longest, and that was mainly because he has such a huge territory. He does these massive loops of around about 15 to 20 kilometers, and one day he'll be on one side and the next day he'll be somewhere else. So it took quite a long time to lure him into one particular spot and get him to stay there long enough so that we could set the trap and replace his collar. And in total, it took the field team 113 hours of pre-baiting, which just gives you an idea of the kind of labour-intensive nature of this activity for us. A very important part of the work that we do is stakeholder engagement, and this is happening constantly, but around about the March time, we run a landowner, land manager workshop. They're a particularly important group because we knew that the cats would probably end up on estates at some point. We didn't realize probably quite how quickly, but all of these estates, you know, they release pheasants and partridges, which is probably, you know, it's quite a good lure for the cats. And they are also important because they do some level of predator control. And obviously we want to talk through about precautionary predator control, what risks are, but mainly it's really about having very open communication with these guys and being able to talk through different scenarios, what they thought might happen, how we can, if we are best placed to help them, and potentially what mitigation moving forward was needed, as well as developing a communication strategy. So with them, that we share a lot of the tracking data so that they're aware of how the cats are using their particular estate and the land there. Another obviously very important part of our work is the trap, neuter, vaccinate and return. So this is reducing the level of hybridization risk and disease transfer to wildcats. And Lara, our project officer, she really leads this within the team. And it is very intensive. And it's a bit of an all or nothing thing in terms of she's out there, she's trying to identify individuals that might be feral cats that need to be neutered. We don't know much about them, but it's not just that part. She has to communicate with people locally in order to establish whether that is a feral cat, whether it's a pet cat. And then once she's been able to do that, the picture on the far right-hand side shows the international symbol of a neutered feral cat, which is just taking off the top of the left ear. And that means that it's a symbol that means that they hopefully won't get trapped again unless they really like going in traps. but it means that people know that that is a cat that has been neutered, so they don't need to worry about it. And this is something that is ongoing, and yeah, again, very, very resource intensive. Probably the most exciting part for us, I mean, most for the whole team, but especially for the field team, was being able to capture the first footage of wild-born wildcats. Now, this wasn't the first litter, but this was some of the first footage that we got, and that was with help of a local gamekeeper who had contacted us and said that he thinks that the female that he knew was using the estate was carrying something in his mouth. So we rushed on site, we got up some cameras, and we were rewarded with this amazing footage. And it just kind of kept happening. Next slide, please. And what was really remarkable was that 7 of the 10 females produced kittens. And there's some photos of the different individuals on the right-hand side. And what was probably more astonishing was that 2 of those females ended up having a second litter. And there was a minimum of 24 kittens across the whole site. We noticed that the litter sizes were roughly, well, the most common one was 3. I think we had 1, possibly 2 that were 4. What was surprising to us, though, was that the dispersal seemed to happen at probably quite a lot younger than we were expecting, so 4 to 5 months old. What became clear to us was that monitoring kittens was extremely difficult once they got to this type of age. When they're small and the mother, you know, she would move them around a bit, but we were able with our trail cams, a lot of the stuff that we already had in situ that were picking up kittens, but we were able to get quite a lot of footage. But as these kittens started to disperse, we've really lost track of where they are. They're probably dispersing out with the area. You know, we have no idea about survival, but we're just hoping that some of these might just pop up on some of the trail cams that we do have out and about. And then, of course, we moved into the summer, and we did the next lot of releases. As Estelle mentioned, we released 9 wildcats, but the conditions compared to 2023 were pretty different. If we could cast our minds back to 23, the summer was quite warm, it was dry, it was sunny. Whereas last year, I think we would all agree that it wasn't particularly great. It was quite wet, and this can have an effect on how the cats kind of fare post-release. And then also, with the help of the Cairngorms Connect Predator Project and Aberdeen University, they have been tracking the vole numbers, which is the thing that the wildcats are really solely dependent on when what they're feeding on. They've been tracking those numbers for many, many years. And what is noticed is that they go in these 4-year cycles. So they'll peak and then they'll start to drop off. We knew that 23 was one of the high years. So we knew that it was going to start tailing off in 2024. And sadly, we did have 2 wildcats that died quite soon after release. So we had one that did die of starvation. What was kind of unusual about that was from 23, we had an idea of what to look for within the GPS movement data to maybe signify that something was going wrong with individuals. But with this female, there wasn't that indication. And what was kind of more unusual, I guess, is that there were a couple of other cats in the same vicinity. So we're not really sure what really happened there. And then the other one, which was really unfortunate, was that she got hit by a car, and not on the A9, you know, not on the A95 or a busy road. It was on one of the really quiet roads, which was just very, very unfortunate. But what was positive about that, in a way, was when they did the post-mortem, they found that her stomach was full of small mammals. So she was, you know, she was doing the right thing. She was hunting, which is great. So just continuing with the cats from 24, we've had one male that disappeared. We don't know what's happened, where he's gone. He could have just gone through one of the straths or glens and ended up somewhere else, and we just haven't been able to pick him up. It did happen with a couple of the males from 23 as well. So it's unfortunate, but it happens. a lot of the cats have moved extensively. And I say 4 to 5 that have crossed the river because we have one male that keeps going backwards and forwards all the time. And what's staggering about that is the fact that he's clearly swimming. And we, was the river going to become a barrier? It clearly hasn't, because they haven't really been crossing over the bridges. They've been crossing by swimming, which is amazing. So we're still tracking 6 of the 7 surviving wildcats, and I thought I'd just put a bit of an image board of the individuals, because we have been fortunate enough to get some camera trap imagery of these individuals. So looking at some of the challenges, one thing that people might well be aware of is chicken predation. So this sneaky cat got caught in the daylight going into one of the chicken coops locally, and we've had around about 11 incidences reported to us. So it's really important that people are coming and telling us about it. What's surprising maybe is that a lot of these chickens are or were free range, and maybe just getting locked up at night. So the cats were actually trying to get them during the daytime. So it means that people are having to be a little bit more vigilant about protecting their chickens. Next slide, please. And what we have been doing is we've been offering drop-in sessions for people that have been affected to come and talk to us about it and look at what we can do to help, what advice we can give. We've got dedicated WhatsApp groups to update people on the presence of wildcats, so they can maybe be a bit more vigilant about making sure that they're locking up their chickens. But we've also been working with affected parties, offering these wheelable chicken coops around their gardens to understand if this is a good way of being able to keep their chickens but keeping predators out of them. So we've got a couple of those that are out in the community and being trialed. Next slide. But then we've also been working with a local farmer, Patrick Harrison, who has some commercial chickens, and he had one of the collared females and some of her kittens that were around that were clearly predating his chickens. So we've been working with him again on another trial. So we've offered materials and help in constructing this larger chicken coop, which we will then monitor and kind of keep track of whether this is effective and that it's keeping not just cats but other predators out as well. And we're really thankful for him allowing us to kind of use this as a trial, that he's so open to working with us. The next challenge has been around pheasants. As I said before, a lot of the cats have ended up on the kind of more traditional sporting estates that are releasing pheasants. And it didn't seem to be that predation was something that people were concerned about. It was more about disturbance. So the pheasants getting disturbed by the cats once they've been released from the pheasant pens. But then the other thing that happened a couple of times during last year was cats getting into the pheasant pens, which is less than ideal. It obviously causes the birds quite a lot of stress, as well as the people that are trying to care for those birds. So we've been working alongside gamekeepers to really understand what can be done. So next slide, please. And we've been working alongside NatureScot, finalising guidance for these types of instances. This is a learning process, and this guidance will help inform us, but it will also help inform affected individuals as to how best these situations can be dealt with. But obviously looking at prevention is the best thing. So better predator proofing of pens, and maybe looking at different deterrents and trialing those to see if they have an effect. But most importantly, I guess it's keeping conversations open and being able to discuss these incidences, what has happened, how have people felt, what these experiences have been. And again, in March, we'll be holding the next Gamekeeper workshop, which I'm sure will be drawing on a lot of what has been going on, but working towards how we can collaborate as one big team, should I say, and how to best navigate these situations moving forward. So what is happening right now? click through these as well, Helena. So Alex has been out and about. He is responsible for our winter survey. So this will be the 5th winter that we will have run this survey, and we have a network of over 100 cameras across our core project area, and that is expanding quite rapidly. And he'll be responsible for checking those, and they'll be checked over the winter months. It's the best time of year to try and capture cats on camera, but also looking at other species and capturing some amazing footage, hopefully. Click again. Lara, as I said, is working hard with Trap, Neuter, Vaccinate and Return. She's working on a couple of farms currently, identifying individuals, and Jamie assists her in terms of identification. He is responsible for our catalogue, pun intended. He's put together a huge catalogue of cats, whether that is wildcats, whether that's feral domestic cats, pet cats, so that we have this database that we can use and check through. And that's really, really vital to the work that we're doing. Click again. Scat collection. Now, I could spend the whole talk just talking about this. We are out in the field, obviously, all the time. So we're trying to collect as much scat as we possibly can. This then gets sent to Wild Genes at Edinburgh University, and they process it all. Now, it's very slow process. It takes about 10, 11 months to be able to get all the information back, just because of the way that the process is done. But hopefully this will give us a really good understanding of what the wildcats are eating. And yeah, it's just quite exciting, and everyone loves a bit of poo. Click again. Tracking, obviously we are tracking pretty much every day, and that is not going to be stopping anytime soon, especially when we look to releases again. The workload for us goes up. It's quite challenging. It's great fun. So yeah, that's our bread and butter, I guess, for us. And as I showed before, we are currently in the process of trapping, because the collars are yet again, especially for the 24 cats, they are starting to die. So we need to get trapping of the cats and look at collar removal or recollaring. And as I say, they do have weak links, so they will drop off. And we have had quite a few actually in the field be dropping off the cats. And it's quite a funny feeling actually when you have cats with now no collars, because we have known and followed them every day for such a long time now. It's quite strange that now we're moving more to a kind of a passive monitoring system of using all the camera trap surveys. And then just lastly, I just wanted to go through this sequence of camera trap images, so you can click through, Helena, because it's just an idea. So from a particular camera trap that we've had out, just showing the different species that we're catching on the camera traps, and yeah, it's really lovely work for us. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to answering some of your questions.
Thanks, Helena, and thanks, Louise and Estelle, and thanks everybody for all your questions. I was trying to answer a few while Helena was manning the slides, so hopefully managed to get through a few of them on the chat. Yeah, I think hopefully you've got the impression that this project is a bit of a team effort. There's a huge number of people involved, and it really takes a village to recover a species. It's probably a village of lots and lots of different people, quite a big one. Maybe even a global village, because we have lots of people from all across the world that have been helping us with ideas and things, including obviously our partners in Sweden and Spain and Portugal. So just a big thanks to the team in our partnership. Next slide, Helena. Sorry, I just realised I'm not changing them. And also to the local community here in and around the release site. Had a huge amount of support working together with people, and really grateful for everyone's feedback and some challenging conversations with people as well, which is really important to make sure that we can get into the right space for ensuring this species is bringing the benefit to everybody here locally as well. That's really, really important to us. Thanks so much to all of our funders and supporters. There's a huge number of different organisations and people that have come together to make this project possible. We're really grateful to them. And we're also really grateful to a whole range of different zoos and wildlife parks that hold wildcats and manage the captive breeding programme that's been the source of the wildcats that have come to the wild. You know, please go and support them if there's any of them near you. And just probably one more. And thanks so much to all of you for listening. There's been quite a lot of people in the chat that have talked about their sponsorship cats and told us that they're supporting us, and we're really, really grateful to you for that, because it's really important. It helps us do the work we do, and it's also a great encouragement when we're out in the field, out feeding cats, looking after them, and tracking cats over winter time and things like that. So really grateful to you for your support. If you are a supporter already, if you'd like to help, be really grateful for your sponsorship, or please check out our new t-shirts or just sign up to our newsletter so that you can stay in touch with all the latest news that gets sent out every 2 months, and we put various opportunities in there as well and things like that. So please do stay in touch with us, and thanks so much, everybody.
Huge thank you to Helen, Estelle and Lou for sharing so much of their work with us this evening, and a massive thank you to all of you who took time out of your day to join us here. We are so incredibly grateful for all of your support, and we really appreciate all the questions that you have had for us this evening. I know we didn't get to all of them, so if you do have any further questions, I have popped our email address in the chat. That's wildcats@rzss.org.uk. You can also ask us any questions on our social media channels as well. We have a team that is dedicated to answering everyone's questions. So if there's anything that you would like to ask that you haven't already, just please let us know. We typically do one of these every year. We do an online event in January. We also typically do an in-person event at Edinburgh Zoo in October, and if you are local, we will be at various events throughout the summer, such as the Highland Games and some of the agricultural shows. So please do feel free to come over and talk to some of the team. We'd love to have a chat with you all. So thank you so much for this evening. Wishing you all the best, and again, a huge thank you to Estelle, Helen and Lou. Bye everyone.
Bye, thank you.
Bye, thanks for your questions.